Sex is a vital part of human life, but how should we approach it? Western society sends us mixed messages about sexuality. We're not taught how to understand our relationship to our bodies, and this often leads to feelings of shame, avoidance, and in extreme cases, toxic and dangerous behaviour. We should all strive to be authentic, and ignoring or masking our sexuality can only lead to negative outcomes. But where should we start? Right here. My guest today is Nadja Lasbeck. She's an intimacy coach, relationship therapist, lecturer, and a mother. Nadja and I discuss how to raise children in a sex-positive environment, if butterflies are a prerequisite for chemistry, why we shouldn't compromise in relationships, the role of shame in blocking intimacy, difference between fantasy and desire, what the definition of a friendship crush is, if Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a bit gay, whether we should keep our socks on or off in the bedroom, how to communicate discomfort in the bedroom, the role of culture in shaping our sexuality, masculinity, the difference between sensuality and sexuality, and Eurotrash. Please enjoy this beautiful exploration of sexuality with Nadja Lasbeck. Nadja, so tell me what's brought you to where you are today and the work you do.
So I now mainly work as a sex and couples therapist. I come from body work. So I used to be a yoga teacher before that. And the part of yoga that was most interesting to me was always the therapeutic aspect of it. So I used to already practice yoga therapy, which is a little bit different from what we exercise in the West. So usually when we go to a yoga class, it's about movement and about being aware in the movement and breathing. It's a lot about breathing. But there's an entire different aspect to yoga that just deals with your whole well-being in a very complex way. And that was already very fascinating to me. And then therapy has always been a part of my life because of my personal history. I have a bit of a difficult family background. My own story was just very turbulent. So therapy has always been a part of my life, as in like being a client in therapy. And I always dealt with the subject of health already and felt like it was logical to integrate every aspect of it. And then because I'm kind of a jack of all trades, I used to do so many different things. I have worked with sexuality in other parts as well already. So I've had a business where I would make bondage accessories, leather accessories. I used to work in a corset factory, like all of these weird different jobs. And so sexuality has always been a main part of my interest as well, because I feel like it's one of the major ways that humans express themselves in their surrounding. And I do believe that ultimately sexuality is the base of most of the things that we do in our daily life. And so it kind of was just like a holistic thinking of like all of these parts are very important to being human, is being healthy in your body and being healthy in your mind and being healthy in your sexuality, because I think that's a part that is a little bit neglected in our society. We are very overstimulated, but we have very few tools that are given to us on how to deal with that and how to like actually produce connection to other people physically as well as emotionally, mentally. And I think that's about like the way that I got there. And right now I also do a lot of teaching. So I teach therapists, and either they are already therapists and they want to specialize or gather more information about the work around sexuality and relationships. Or sometimes it's also people that are entirely new to the field. So that's very interesting. I'm trying to move a little bit further over there, to be honest, because I love working with clients, but I don't know, teaching has just always been very fulfilling.
Is that your lecture work, is it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yes.
I like work. It's a little bit because I come from body therapy. When I teach therapists, I will do little lecture work, and then I will also do a lot of like physical exercising and experiencing. So what does it mean to experience intimacy with other people apart from when we are talking? So there's a lot of verbal intimacy, or what we think is verbal intimacy, but a lot of people actually have never made the experience of physically connecting in a very intimate way, because that's a lot more about being vulnerable and making difficult experiences in connection to someone.
And what type of therapist do you teach? Just to clarify.
They come from different backgrounds. A lot of times it's people that already work with talk therapy, so that's analysis or behavioral therapy, because that's the in Germany, those are the big schools of therapy here, because those are financed by the insurance system. And they usually lack any education on sexuality. They will have the baseline of analytics, which is you have different forces in your life. So you have a destructing force and you have the erotic force, which is kind of what do you say? So one is destructing and the other one is kind of like the force that is like building life. But they will learn that, and it pretty much stops there. And then it happens a lot to colleagues that they will be in therapy in session with clients, and the clients describe how they have difficulties in their sexuality. And when I have zero tools on how to navigate that, how to connect that to the other problems that they face in their life, usually my colleagues will describe that they just felt overwhelmed with the subject. And a lot of my clients actually come to me because they are already in therapy with someone else, and they said like, oh, but my therapist doesn't want to talk about sex.
Wow. Yeah, that's so interesting. I think yeah, it makes total sense, doesn't it? Just makes total sense. It's such a huge part of who we are, isn't it? And when you, like, I'm in therapy at the moment, and like maybe touched on some stuff to do with like relationships, but I haven't spoken about sex. Probably useful because I've had like none of it for a very long time.
By choice?
No, involuntary celibacy. No. No, yeah, just been on a dry run, Nadja. Nadja.
Usually,
I've do you know, I start these conversations and I go, don't overshare. Whatever you do not overshare.
no, we all love a good oversharing. No.
Yeah, like this is something I'm getting the balance with at the moment, because I don't really struggle with, this sounds like a little bit cliche, but I don't really struggle with the authenticity because I'm really open, but I have to be kind of, yeah, I have to protect myself as well to not be too. But anyways, here's me telling you
I do that a lot. Sometimes I do that in therapy, that I will share information afterwards. I'm like, oh, I'm not sure if that hasn't crossed like all boundaries that are supposed to. I think it helps people. I think we all, most of us really miss connection. And I think that's why elements like podcasts and social media are so successful, is because we all look for connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think usually the conversations where I'm like, oh God, why did I say that? Or what was I talking about there? Like, I just seem like some sort of weirdo. They're the people who I still talk to now.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, we went slightly off on a tangent then. So we were talking about, sexuality as it relates to sort of therapist work. So one of the things that I was thinking about, you're in Germany, I'm in England. How does like what you were saying and that sort of like overall color of the industry and the sort of avoidance of sex and sexuality, is that a Western thing? Are you aware of? Is it more of a German thing? Is it a fill in the blank?
It's definitely a cultural thing. I believe that we're still in Europe, so we're fortunate enough to have not grown up with the kind of intensity that US Americans grew up with around sexuality. I noticed that because I am in Berlin, so I have a lot of clients from all over the world. And I noticed that US Americans, they usually struggle the most with their sexuality. They struggle a lot with like the authenticity. As you said before, it's one of the main elements in connecting to other people. And so if you struggle with that, it's very, very difficult to form meaningful connections to other people. And I can see that in sex therapy, how difficult that is, and how a lot of people feel just very isolated and lonely, and it's very difficult for them, or like they were never taught how there's a connection between the way that you can physically express yourself with other people and the way that you can emotionally feel safe. And so for Europeans, that is definitely different. There's smaller details in these cultural differences. So if I work with people that are from the south of Europe, they have a heavy influence from the Catholic Church. So they will have a different relationship to their sexuality from Germans or French people. Is definitely a difference. They have a different relationship to their bodies in general, and to being naked also, like that's a big part. British people usually, the ones that I meet, there's no normalized nudity in families, so that's like an element. And then it makes a huge difference until like if just worked with an Indian couple, and they were surprisingly open talking about their sexuality. They had a different approach to therapy also. They came with a clear idea on what they want to do and where they want to go. So, and it was very refreshing for me, because they both had kind of a mindset of like, if I want things to change and improve, I will have to be open, and it will probably be uncomfortable. That is something that is not a given with German clients, for sure. So that's very interesting, how these differences really do make a lot of like they cultivate in our personalities and in our relationships. And therapy wise, I can tell not much of a difference, honestly. I think it's not that. I think for most therapists, it's not so much that it touches their own like sensitive parts. It's really just that they just don't know what to do with the subject. Because it doesn't, after all, your sexuality doesn't translate one-to-one into your personal life. So there's a cliche of the businessman who goes into the BDSM studio every night to get like whipped his ass. And so that's not like, it's a very complex structure of someone who is in charge and leading and is very much overwhelmed with fulfilling this role all the time. So he seeks release on this other part, on this other spectrum, and it does find its release in the sexuality, because that is like the privatest part of our life. And so it's a little bit complex. And I can see why people are very much, like from the professional side, are just like overwhelmed with it. If you have not studied it a little bit deeper, then you would probably just not know what to do with it and how to deal with it. But yeah, mainly I can only speak for like Western culture, really. I don't know. I think I have a little bit of a connection to India, so there's like, I know that in India you have more professionals who are outspoken about the importance of sex therapy. You don't have too many here, actually.
Yeah, I think yeah, I mean a lot of us Brits have Irish roots and Catholicism as well. So I think that's where a lot of that comes from. That kind of the sort of just I think for a lot of us, like sex, if you've been sort of not brought up in that sort of household, because I wasn't brought up in it like a Catholic per se household, but obviously you pick these things up via like osmosis, I guess. And yeah, like shame is one that sort of seems to arise. You're kind of like, whoa. But I have to admit, like, it's been something that's been like really quite revelationary, like to me, in like interviewing different people. I had Julia Jules, who's a BDSM dominatrix and sex coach, and this was like so new to me to like understand. Like I was of the opinion that that anyone with a kink was a red flag.
Really?
I must admit, I'm still kind of like, this is something I'm still, and I want to discuss it with you actually.
Yeah.
Because I sort of like, well, during that conversation, I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, that like that makes sense, and yeah, like, it's not necessarily a red flag. And then I was reflecting on it, and then I was like, but I suppose the counter argument to that might be, let's do the example of the high flying executive who likes to go into the dungeon to allow himself to be like submissive. Would it not be, inverted commas, more healthy to like sort out his relationship in his business world in real time, rather than kind of like holding it back and then having to get spanked to release that tension? Talk to me about that.
I think, like, to me, this is a little bit like the chicken and the egg, because we have a society that does not promote a healthy sexual lifestyle. So the question is, and that is a main question, I think, in therapy in general, is like, is society sick or are individuals sick? What's happening?
Society.
Yeah, society is not healthy, and people are adapting to their surroundings. My general thought is that I think absolutely everyone that I have met, I was about to say in my work, but actually, honestly, no, everyone absolutely everyone that I have met and I have had like deeper conversations with, I could 100% say that they have done the best that they could to adapt to the situation that they're in. So there's a little bit of like, it gets a little bit philosophical, because I also don't work with diagnosing, because I think diagnosing kind of like it implies that there's something to be corrected, when like that there is like an objective reality to who is healthy and who isn't. And I just don't think that that's the case. I don't think that exists. I think we have something that we agreed upon as the norm in our society, and then there are people who do not fit in that box. And if you look at it close enough, no one fits in that box. It's like Emily Nagoski makes this great example of like when you have a study with about 1,000 people in it, then you have these thousands of people and you can basically arrange them all on like a line, and you have one person that is at the end of the line in that era, and then the other person is at the other end of that spectrum. And then we, as like in science, we'll figure out where's the exact middle ground, and that is the norm. Whereas this is a real person, this is a real person, and that in the middle is probably not a real person. You know? So it gets abstract. And I think that's the same for sexuality as it is in everything. To come back to the question of like, because I think that's an interesting thought, is like, so is a kink kind of a red flag or not? The question is, for me, what do you associate with a kink? Like, what is a kink? And what do you think is like the unhealthiest part about it? Is it that you think that person will not be able to have normal, healthy sex with you? Or what's the question in your background?
Is that a direct question?
Yeah.
Yeah, just checking. I suppose from my like limited experience, those who I've like dated who have a more kinky side, on average, have likely gone through some trauma, like, well, quite heavy trauma.
Yeah.
Not that I'm imparting any judgment on that person for having to go through that. That's not what I'm saying. But I suppose, but this is what we do, isn't it? Yeah, we do judge, especially if we're looking for a partner. Everyone says no judgment. No judgment. We are judging, aren't we?
You have to choose somehow.
Yeah, because we have to choose someone. So I'm going to take that back. I am judging a little bit, but I'm judging with compassion. So I suppose when you're looking for a partner, when you're looking for, especially like, by the way, like if you're like a little bit crazy like me, we're looking for secure partners. So if anything is going to raise like, oh, maybe a red flag, like, is that the right sort of relationship for me? The classic, an anxious attached with a fearfully disorganized avoidant. Those two relationships don't go very well. So I suppose you're always looking for the right sort of match. And if someone says, yeah, I like being fill in the blank, it could be an indicator. I was like, oh, okay, maybe there's something going on there. Mm-hmm. Again, whereas those that are like mega vanilla from person experience tend to have had like a quite nice, secure, loving childhood. We've not that much gone on. So I guess that's where it comes from.
Because I think So the first thing that you said is I would agree with a lot of people that are like heavy into BDSM usually use that as a tool to actually kind of correct their traumatizing experiences. That's a very common thing. But then what's very funny is that the people that are like heavy vanilla, those are usually people that do carry very heavy trauma that they have not looked into at all. So they're really just at the how'd you say, like on the compensating side.
Yeah, do you know, I would totally agree with that, by the way. Yeah, there's like a tipping point for vanilla.
Mm-hmm.
Like yeah, totally. Yeah, because it's like, well, you're that vanilla? Shit, there's something going on.
Always have to be under your blanket and it can't happen outside of the bedroom. I think these are the things that in therapy I will look out for and be like, oh well, what's happening there?
Yeah, because like it's something, you know, I've been sort of like considering myself, like I'd always class myself as like fairly vanilla.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, is there a block there? Like, is this like, I don't think so, but who knows?
Yeah, no. There are
Maybe.
people who, so that's also a thing, right? So as I said in the beginning, like we're overstimulated. We're also like overstimulated with the options. And for a lot of people, I also work as like a figure of authority, which is really funny to me. But sometimes in therapy, I will have to like tell clients that it's okay to not want like crazy sex. A lot of people are just like, I just want to be like, I just want to be comfortable, actually. And I think that's very legit. But it's something that in the 21st century, you're not being communicated anymore. That it's totally fine to just seek comfort and yeah, like there are very soft sides of connection.
Yeah, and I suppose like, yeah, that mega vanilla-ness is kind of like, it's a bit like avoidance, isn't it? Like it's like feels like a close cousin.
Yeah.
To kind of like, no, I'm fine, I'm vanilla. Don't touch me.
Nothing. It's also, yeah, but well, it's also avoiding the uncomfortable feelings sometimes. Because like in sexuality, you will experience uncomfortable things like I don't know, changing moods. Something that is just uncomfortable sometimes in connection to other people. If I started out feeling, I don't know, wild and free and we start having sex and then at some point something happens, my mood changes and I don't really want that anymore. Question is, how can I express that? And that goes beyond the limits of like super vanilla. It's being like, no, actually, I don't want this. Just, you know, stop it. Can we do something else? Or can we just like stop it entirely? Because then, you know, that's discomfort. And that can be very difficult to some people, to a lot of people, actually.
And that's difficult, isn't it? Like how do let's use that as an example. So couple are engaging in the bedroom and like one partner, let's say it's the female just for an example, is feeling uncomfortable but doesn't want to hurt the other person's feelings, make them feel, you know, maybe they're already like quite self-conscious around their sexuality. How should couples or the partner in that situation go about communicating that in a compassionate way?
I think that's the main difficulty is that we most of us have this ideal of communicating in a compassionate way and like, you know, always having space for the other person, and that's where the discomfort comes in, is that that's not always possible. if I don't want something, I don't want something. And I will have to take up that space addressing that and be like, no, I don't want it. I don't feel it anymore. And the other person, unfortunately, in this example, like the partner already is like kind of super conscious about their body, their performance, whatever. I cannot take on the responsibility for that, unfortunately. I wish there was a way where I could instruct people and be like, this is how you communicate this in a compassionate and like nice way. But it's just not. You're disappointing an expectation from the other side. That is what's happening. But I think you'll have to shift the focus on that being okay. Things like these happen. And there is discomfort in being with each other. So one part is do not hold your partner responsible for wanting something that you don't want. And at the same time, expect them to be as self-responsible to deal with their own insecurities in that moment. And like, you can still, as a couple, hold space for that. That is possible. And just be like, I don't want this. I don't feel it anymore. I'm sorry. I know you wanted this, but I'm out. And then the other person will be like, oh, shit. Well, I feel like a bag of beans now. And you can manage that if you do not hold your partner responsible for your own feelings. And that is something that's just very, very difficult for other people, because it's a mechanism of safety to be like, no, but now you're making me feel shit. You know, that's what my work usually comes down to, is like figuring that out in therapy, in session, and being like, okay, well, how did this feel? Where did the feeling come from? Because this is also something about dynamics, is the fact that I am super conscious about my body. That's something that stems from my past. It's not something that my partner did to me usually. Maybe they have done their part to it, you know, and fed that part of me that is telling me the story of like how I am undesirable. But they did not make that part inside of me. And as yeah, that's usually the process behind it. But in the situation, the communication, I think is not, because people come and they think like we have to work on our communication skills, and about 95%, it's not about the communication. People communicate totally okay. Yeah. It's very rare in my work that people will just insult each other all the time. They don't. It's just that we're in a dynamic where whatever you say, I will have an emotional reaction to that. And that reaction stems from my past. It's not entirely about what you said. This is a story that I carry with me. And then I have an outgoing reaction to that. So I'll say something to you, and then you will have an emotional reaction to that. That also has, you know, and it just like, it's a cycle and a cycle and a cycle. And the best thing that you can do is to just be very direct and authentic. So sometimes I will teach clients to retreat to like child language. Instead of like, oh, this really hurt me, and I know you didn't want that, but it kind of did this to me, and blah, blah, blah. I'll be like, next time, instead of making 5 sentences, just say, ouch. It probably will be a lot easier, because if you just say, ouch, I'm hurting, there's no implication of the other person being responsible for that. There's no implication of how I expect you to do differently, or, you know, it's just like, that's just an observation of the current state is ouch. And that's something that I would say is like, if you don't want to do it anymore, say that you don't want to do it anymore. There needs to be no extra information to that. It's just kind of like, no, I'm not doing it anymore.
Focus on the feeling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And like, don't, you don't have to apologize for the things that you're feeling, right? So the other person as well can just be like, well, ouch, I feel undesirable now. You know, like, this will help. It will be like very clear.
Yeah, that's like quite a useful prompt, isn't it? Just keep like, I'm feeling X symbols.
It's an exercise
Sounds,
actually, where I teach couples to like that they have a couple of minutes of just saying like, I feel X, I feel Y, and there's forbidden stuff in there like, I feel X because you, like, that's a buzzer. No,
yeah.
it's something that I like. I keep practicing with clients because it's so important.
I had an attachment expert on last week, and one of the sort of insights I had, and it feels relevant here, is like becoming more secure is like learning like 1,000 different jiu-jitsu moves and different response. So
Do you practice jiu-jitsu?
I did for a little while, for about 3 months, and then I got a knee injury, and then I didn't go back, but I loved it. And I'd still like, I might go back at some point. I've just got to get the confidence because I tore my meniscus. But yeah, it do you?
Yeah, I went once. No, it's just very funny because I have this podcast that I do with my friend, and he is so much into BJJ, and he keeps talking about like BJJ is a reference to anything with him, which is
Oh, really?
funny. And but in like it keeps coming back into my conversations, people talking about jiu-jitsu, and I'm like, what?
Yeah,
The world about jiu-jitsu, but it seems to be. Yeah, it seems to be a thing where people learn a lot more than just movements from it.
yeah, I think yeah, it's just such it's such a like a beautiful sport. And there's so many, how you say, metaphors and things, and but yeah, going back to like how to communicate your feelings better and things like that. It's like drilling. So what you were talking about before is, the exercise, I feel X, I feel X. What you're doing there is you're drilling a behavior. Sorry, drilling a what's the word? Like a protocol to follow. But the idea is, like in any habit, over time that starts to become the norm, and it's less rigid, and um yeah, it's being able to add those in, isn't it?
Yeah. Also, it makes for positive feedback. I think that's something that's just missing a lot in interpersonal communication. Is same as for sexuality. If I start exercising, talking about my feelings without first off having an immediate reaction from my surroundings, but also no one needing to correct me on my feelings, that will be a positive experience, as in I'll feel safe and sound where I am. So that's something that kind of reinforces itself. I will seek to have that experience again. Whereas if I am constantly having conversations where I am being corrected and I don't know, the other person doesn't let me speak for myself, or I am blaming a lot and the other person is like defending themselves most of the time, then I will not look for that conversation to happen again, because it's not a very pleasant experience. Or what I'm taking from it is unresolved conflict. So maybe if in my dynamic I am looking for that because I'm kind of like, my inner programming is fighting windmills, then I will look for that, but it won't be a pleasant experience. And this is kind of just like the other model to it, which hopefully leaves, from my experience, luckily, pretty much all of the time, it leaves people with an entirely new modus of communicating and having this new experience of just like being able to express myself without any feedback on that, really, except that I am noticing that the other person is still here and they're still engaging. And that's something that I think is kind of a baseline to human experience in life, is that we're looking to be safe and sound where we are. But we'll have to work for that experience. It doesn't just come, unfortunately.
Yeah. Sounds so simple when you put it like that.
It's really not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like strangely, it is beautifully simple, but unfortunately we're not beautifully simple creatures.
No, we're like my father was a neurobiologist, and I always have to think about how we are the same physical structure as any other animal, but we're unfortunate enough to be cultural beings and to have a mindset that can somewhat grasp the vastness of existence. And as great as a tool that is, it's extremely overwhelming, I think.
Culture is such an interesting concept. I can't remember, someone said this, and it was like, culture is not your friend. And I suppose it can be, but like it's an interesting cue. It's an interesting prompt to kind of like make you kind of like look at it from a different height. And like, yeah, but it's just such an interesting like phenomena when you really start digging into it. Like, what is culture?
Yeah.
Like, am I part of culture? Is culture? I mean, like, yeah, it's you can really go deep with that question and sort of like look at how it shows up in your life and how it's giving you like a set of predefined responses that you should have to a certain situation, but they might not actually be true to your like inner self.
Yes.
Went off a tangent there. What is
You said that you're I'm a little bit curious about that. You said that you were doing good, and it sounded like you were doing better than in the past, and being authentic, as you were just talking about, like, you know, pre-programmed culture responses. I just thought about that. What do you have in mind? Like, what changed in your authenticity?
Could you rephrase that? Sorry.
Yeah. In the beginning of our conversation, you said that you're pretty good now in like being authentic in conversation. I think you were referring to conversation. And just as you just said that, it just like it came back to my mind, and I was wondering, like, there's something that from this cultural pre-programming that you've kind of left behind in order to be more authentic.
Yeah, I think it comes back to like that that shame element like around like sexuality. So like, I feel like the person that I was showing up as was like a slightly sanitized version of like my true self. So I'll tap into that a little bit more. So I used to think that like I was always very wary of, I guess, what you would call today like this whole toxic masculinity thing. And like any guy, yeah, I'm lifting the hood now. Apologies, guys. When guys are in a room together and there's no women around, we behave very differently. Or like or certainly if 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 there's no girlfriends or wives there, we just do. we're more laddie, as I don't know if you would use that term in Germany, but just and we might talk about, oh, did you see her, or what, and it's obviously quite there's a lot of testosterone and stuff like that. And I think I used to like feel kind of like bad in those situations, like kind of like, men are gross. Um, but then like I've sort of like realized that this is just what men do. This is what men do to bond.
Mm-hmm.
We've done it for millennia. Obviously, we've done lots of things for millennia that are not acceptable when it comes to that sort of thing, and masculinity and this kind of like energy. So I'm not saying that that's okay, but like it's okay to have kind of like this drive and this energy that comes with being a healthy hormonal male. So I think I'm just much more comfortable with allowing that side of me to like be there.
Mm-hmm.
And how, yeah, testosterone is healthy. High libido is healthy. Now, what you do with those things, then that's a different thing. But I guess the crux of what I'm saying is I feel like true masculinity is like having that power and that drive, but having control and mastery over it, and be a protector for your community and use it in a positive way to sort of like go forth. I think that answers your question.
And is your sex less vanilla since you're more authentic with that?
Good question. I don't know if it's changed. But also, I hate to say it again, but like, I haven't had much for like the last like year or so. I think, but a lot of that is somewhat of a personal choice. Like, I've been very focused on like training and stuff, and so I've not really put myself out there, anyways.
Yeah.
Um,
I think there's a part about aging also. I mean, I don't think you're too old, but there is
I'm very old.
all right. But I do notice that like leaving your 20s for a lot of people is also leaving connection that is not meaningful to me. It's definitely a trend in aging is just sex without much emotional connection isn't giving me very much anymore, or not of what I need. Whereas the younger I am, the more I like to get that feedback from my surroundings, where I feel desirable because I am like more sexually active. And I think that just kind of fades also for a lot of people.
Yeah, I suppose it's maybe it's life experience, but I suppose like as just like a something I've noticed, like older women, like north of like you said, maybe 30, 35, are like way more comfortable with their sexuality.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, like the other side of the spectrum, like girls in the 20s, certainly some of the generation that's coming through now, I'm led to believe are much more promiscuous. So that's like a different side to it, though, right?
I think it makes them more confident, to be honest.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic. So, like, let's look at like promiscuity.
I don't know.
Yeah, uh, like and like openness and like
being authentic? Like, how do those things interplay?
It's a common question of like, is a lot of sex bad? Is a lot of sex good? There's so many different voices on that, is what I can tell. Like there's because I also deal a lot with like spirituality, and there's a lot of teachings around how you have an exchange of energy and how that can be draining if you engage too much sexually with other people. Then there are other voices from the more like politically progressive side that will focus on how it is important to have that freedom of like sexually engaging with other people as much as you like. And I think there's no, I don't believe in like black and white ideas. I think this is it's super individual. Some people, they experience some true liberation by being promiscuous. Absolutely. And I've had that with clients, and I've noticed how that has been an extremely healthy process for people to, kind of get out of those roles and try shit out. Like that's also something, it's like a lot of people just haven't experienced it. And if you haven't experienced things, sometimes it's very difficult to tell if that fits into your design of how you want to live. And then there are other people also in my work that are or have been very promiscuous and actually have experienced like some real problems with that, or have used that as a method to kind of like measure their self-worth. And that's something that is not very long lasting. And so it can be very problematic. And just one thing that I see from the media that people voluntarily or involuntarily consume is that there's a clear message, or like contradicting messages actually. There are messages on like how being promiscuous is freedom. And then there are other messages on how like basically we're not entirely out of these stereotypical roles that we had 50 years ago. So I think that's just very, very difficult to navigate. And in our generation, we've had a bit of it. I think you're also like me, like part of the later MTV generation. So we've already had a lot of like visually stimulating, sexualized content, but not as much as the younger generations have now. And I think that's it just can be very confusing. And they're undergoing a similar process that I think is natural in the Western society, is that I come out of puberty, out of this process of like leaving my my core family and having to like get away from all of these values first so that I can figure out who I am and what I want to do with life. And I think that's a natural process. But then you usually kind of like partially spiral back onto like, this is your safe ground, this is what you have learned and you have internalized it anyways. And then you come into these 20s, being an adult sexual being and having pleasurable experiences with that. But also, there's a threat of like using this as a tool to define my self-worth. And in both directions, this can be very unhealthy if like my self-worth is tied to being very sexually active, and that's not a great thing. And if my self-worth is tied to being not sexually active at all, like in religious groups, and that's not very healthy as well. Like figuring out what you like and what you want is a process, and the media around us is not making it easier. That's for sure. I don't think that's a great answer, but that's
No.
the complicated reality.
No, it's perfect. Like, yeah, there's a reason. Like, my podcast is called "Awaken Out of Context," and sometimes I need to remind myself of why it's actually called that. But it's like it's basically a play on words, like taken out of context, because everything gets taken out of context, and in life there are no straight lines. There is no cookie cutter answer. As much as I like to like find one and then put it on and clip it up and put it on Instagram.
Yeah.
Like, paradoxically, the kind of those things are useful tools, but they won't like get to the core of like the issue or the nuance that comes with all this stuff.
Yeah.
So like, so what you're saying is, yeah, it's just a beautiful exploration of the complexities of all of these things that interplay. And as you're speaking, like, it just got me thinking, like, there's just so many things to consider. I think, like, how do you feel about, you mentioned earlier in this conversation about like nudity and like families, and like, how can parents instill like a more like a healthy approach to like sexuality without like overstepping the marks? And that's full of like a million different questions itself, isn't it?
I last year I did a workshop for parents actually on that.
Wow.
And so like anything with parenting, in regards to parenting, comes back to the best thing that you can do for your child is to be authentic and approachable, which means that you must work without concepts. Like, I can tell you like this and that is the healthiest way to experience sexuality, eroticism for children, adolescents. But then if it's just a concept to you, that you're kind of like putting over this whole relationship that you have to your child, and it's not going to do that thing. It's going to do an entirely different thing. So that's the real tricky part about being a parent is, and I have to think about Ramdas, funnily enough, because I'm actually not a great fan of Ramdas, but he has this teaching of like where he says, the only thing I can do for you is work on myself, and the only thing that you can do for me is work on yourself. And this goes for all sorts of adult relationships, but it actually also goes for the relationships with your children. Is that the very best thing that you can do for your children is work on yourself, actually. It's like work on your issues. Everything that you have not looked at, that you haven't put out on the table, is something that you will unconsciously transfer into the lives of your children.
Yes.
So if you want to teach them a somewhat healthy relationship with their sexuality, which we have already said is not entirely possible in the society that we have, but as much as you can, then it's really just working on your own relationship to your sexuality. So if you're not comfortable being naked, then that's okay. You don't have to run around the house uncomfortably naked so that your children will be more comfortable with it, because they won't.
Yeah, because they'll pick up on the signal that you're uncomfortable anyways.
Yeah, because like the underlying feelings and intentions, they always play a role in the outcome. So if that's something that you actually want to do, that's something that you also have to figure out. A lot of things is just something that we have, like messages that we get from our surroundings is like, you should be doing this and that because it would be better and it would be healthier. So the question is that something that actually you want to do? Is that something that you want to change? And if you do, then, work on your own relationship with your body. just, I don't know, find tools to be more comfortable with yourself first. And this is usually about sensuality. So lots of people have only learned to view their body and other people's bodies in a sexual context. That's something that is very unique about German culture, for example, but also Dutch culture, and in France is similar, is we have a nudist culture. So we grow up, or most of us grow up being around naked people. And it's just absolutely not a sexual thing. It's you go to the sauna and it's entirely asexual. And because we have, as a collective, agreed that it's not sexual. And it's also, it's very serious. If someone in public, like, I don't know, bathhouses or sauna places, if someone sexualizes the situation, they literally get kicked out for that. Like, there is no space for that. It's just not okay. And I think that's something that makes for a lot of confidence with your body. Like, it strips away the layer of having to be desirable all the time. That is something that is like, it's impossible to uphold. So that can be helpful. But also like sensuality, as in, can I feel sensual when I move my body? Is that okay for me to do? And if not, then one thing I did was I went to pole dancing classes, not because I like pole dancing, though actually it's an incredible workout, but because I noticed that I have a barrier to feeling sensual in my body. And I am very good in like strict movements. I come from gymnastics. I used to be a pro gymnast. So I can very well work with my body. And if someone tells me that I should be engaging this one small muscle in this one random part of my body, I can do that because I have a good like sense for my body, but I do not have a good sense for my sensuality. So that's something that I need to engage in. I like, it's something that you can practice, is just being comfortable being a sensual being. And then there's steps to it. Then you can do this like with other people. How can you feel safe and sound while being sensual with other people and stuff like that. And yeah, this can get very abstract. But so the best thing that you can do is just really work on your own relationship to your body, to your sexuality, to your sensuality. Because our children, if they get sex ed in school, then it will mainly focus on diseases and unwanted pregnancies. That has changed much in the last 60 years, I think. And if you want to, it's good that they know that, but also you want to kind of counteract that and also have them experience a different message of like, no, there is a beautiful part to it, and you're not entirely irrational for wanting to experience that and, having pleasurable feelings with that.
Two things that come to mind. Let me, what's the, so you were talking there about being a sensual being. Like, what's the difference between that and like sexiness? Being a
So it's about that, I think.
It's what, sorry?
I think it's very similar.
It is similar, okay.
Mm-hmm. I would associate the word sexiness more with like the way that I am perceived, whereas being sensual is more like it's
internal.
It's like, this is what I am experiencing. It's this like a feeling of autoeroticism, I guess that would be the correct term.
Yeah, okay. Autoeroticism.
Like I am somewhat stimulated internally without it being sexual. So it's not it's not the kind of mood where you want to like jump into someone's face and fuck them raw. It's that thing in between, like where it just feels good in your body, like a nice massage. That is kind of like, that's the space between not feeling any erotic things, and feeling actually sexual. A massage will give you that feeling in between, just like a very sensual experience.
Yeah, that's a good example, isn't it? Interesting you said jump on their face. So I couldn't help just notice that.
What it is, that's appealing for me.
Yeah. Yeah, good choice. Why? Yeah, always the face. So, yeah, okay. So we were talking about like, so yeah. So this is so interesting. So like massages. So yeah, there's like certainly if you go for like a relaxing massage, like I take like my training quite seriously, so I have like a regular deep tissue massage, but this is deep tissue, so it's not a sensual experience, if you will. But like if you go to something that's
painful, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. It's not. It's it's enjoyable, but yeah, it's not like where they've dimmed the lights and they've got like the pan pipes going and like all these oils and stuff like that.
I'd argue that it's still sensual. It's still a very like intense sensation.
Yeah, it's still intimate, isn't it? Yeah.
I love it. I'm actually, I prefer that usually. I have something that's very common with people with autism or ADHD is something that I notice is that more intense pressure feels more comfortable than like soft stroking, actually, for a lot of folks.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But you were saying something else.
Yeah, cogs turning. Yeah, and I suppose going to like here in the UK, let's say you go for a relaxing massage, there is like this unsaid kind of cultural contract or that's kind of going on in that room, and like this unsaid kind of like energy where like it is sensual. But I think certainly I don't know whether it's different, but certainly in this country we're kind of like we would never like say, oh, that was so sensual. Do you know what I mean? Like, thank you for that sensual experience. Like, this guy's a fucking creep.
I can imagine to like my British friends doing that just to like creep each other out, surely.
Just to what, sorry?
To just creep each other out. Like do that. Fit in their sense of humor.
Yeah. Yeah, it depends. Either that or we'd be just like totally avoidant and like, thank you, bye. And and then come out feeling all confused as to like what we're feeling. That was enjoyable. Don't enjoy it. Fucking hell.
Do it. But if you think about it, so as you were talking before about the lads, is something that especially men, they do that already. They do engage in like sensual practices that are very unique also to these settings. Is they'll do like there's this shoulder grab, this manly shoulder grab. That's definitely something. I see a lot of men also like kissing each other. There's a thing.
Okay.
I think that's more like sports related a lot of times, but there is.
Yeah, maybe like kiss the head or.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like also stroking the head, but there's a lot of like sensual engagement in groups of men. Actually, it has a very different nature from when you look at groups of women usually. Like women will be more open about their intentions of wanting to physically connect. And for men, that's kind of like a tabooed area, but they do have their ways to do that. And if you look at young boys, for example, I love watching kids doing their little like fighting. Like like boys have this like play fighting thing where it's a certain age group until they hit puberty. In the field before that, they'll do a lot of that like play fighting. And if you watch that closely, you will see that it's a lot about like physical connection. They will, for longer periods of time, they will just like lie on top of each other. Or, there's a lot of like rubbing, stimming. It's super interesting. And adult men do that too still. I think like
Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah, exactly. I was about to say, like, I think that's probably a huge factor also in like martial arts.
Yeah, there's something in that like surrender.
Hmm.
And it's kind of like yeah, because I heard someone talking about it recently. He's quite big in the BBJ world, and he's like a bit of what's the word? Just like an antagonist. Like he just likes to wind people up, and he's just kind of, he doesn't take himself too seriously. He takes the piss out of everyone. He annoys everyone. But he was just saying like, yeah, but it's like it's well gay. Jiu-Jitsu. He's like, it's fucking well gay. And he's like just straight up, and then but like all the people who take jiu-jitsu very seriously, like, no, it's not gay, it's manly. It's and he's like, because jiu-jitsu attracts usually guys who weren't physical when they're in school or whatever. They're usually more maybe neurodivergent. They were like shyer. They were, not the sorts of lads that have played
group sports.
Yeah, they've not been a rugby player or whatever, so they come to it later in life. I'm thinking of myself. Yeah. And then, but what happens is then this like becomes like a mask for masculinity, and those guys are like, no, it's not gay. I'm manly. And then, yeah,
Manly, everything being gay.
yeah. And then the guys who are showing real masculinity, like this guy, is kind of like, yeah, it's a bit gay, but it's fine.
Yeah. I mean, you have crotches in your face all the time. I did one class, and I had more physical contact than the rest of that month, surely, as in like really intimate contact, like I don't know, just being in someone's armpit. That's quite intimate.
Yeah.
And
well, if you start from like
my face and my ass in someone's face, like it's intense.
Yeah, we would like start. So if you do a beginner class, you'll usually start from half guard, which basically is one person lying on their back with their legs wrapped around your waist, and you're kneeling up on your knees.
Sounds hot though. I mean,
yeah, I remember like and there's this girl in the class with me, and I was like so awkward.
Yeah,
I was like, we're just beginning, and I'm like kneeling up, and it looks like the start of a sex scene.
Yeah.
Right, guys, count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, get rolling. But yeah,
and that's probably another like very healthy aspect about it, is that you get to normalize that physical contact. And it doesn't have to be sexual, but it can be a little bit sexual. It's okay. And then it's just a little awkward because it's kind of displaced, but that's fine, I guess. I don't know what.
Yeah, I think
vibes in jiu-jitsu, but I'm guessing it can do a lot of good on that area.
I have to admit, I didn't notice like. I don't think I noticed anything like libido-wise going on. Like, despite all that we've just said, like I didn't find it sexual, but there's something about the contact which is like maybe like another string.
Sensual, maybe.
Yeah. But like, interesting. I wanted to just like go back a step because you were talking about like boys and play, and I couldn't really like think too much of that. Like, unfortunately for me, so I grew up, so I didn't have any brothers when I was younger. I have two stepbrothers now, but like they came later in life, and so I was always around women. So I didn't have that kind of rough and tumble play so much, which I think probably like meant that I showed up maybe a little bit like on the like gentler side. Because I wasn't around like guys as much, you know, like kicking shit out of each other and then like just cracking on with, you know, because that's what lads do.
Which would also explain why you were feeling kind of discomfortable or uncomfortable when in what you described as like being with a lad, and
Yeah,
you know, because you knew you grew up with the other side of that.
yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, and in general, like women, I do get along well with women, always have.
Yeah.
But it was interesting what you were saying about the lads that I went to school with won't want me to like saying anything, but we were always like, well, kind of like not touchy, but like there was always like this tension there. And it wasn't that we were like wanting to like anything to happen with each other, but we just had all this energy. And another thing that like we would do is we would be always making jokes about like dicks and gay sex, and it's like yeah, and I think it's probably like quite an unsaid thing. So like lads, if you're listening, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, but it would always be such a sort of comedy, actually. Like we would always find like stuff like that hilarious, like seeing how far you could go in terms of like saying something gross or
I think there's also like, I remember because I grew up with boys only, and for a long time in my life I had mainly male friends also, and there was always this like chicken game where they would see like how close they could come to kiss each other before one would chicken out. And it was hilarious, absolutely. But it was also, for me, it was also very telling.
yeah. Yeah, interesting. It's like
there's an inherent need for touch. And that is just common to like being human. There, you know, there are these terrible, terrible experiments with babies from like 150 years ago, where they would try and see what happens if you do not touch a baby. And what literally happened is that all
Wow.
those babies died.
Yeah, I'm sure. Fucking hell.
Touch is like an absolute necessity.
When was that from?
That was some...
It's been a long time ago, surely.
Yeah. It was in Germany.
Oh. During that period?
No.
Okay. So you can't even blame it on the Nazis.
But it's around like 150 years ago, and it was
right.
It was a monarch who had like the resources to do that, and I think it was like 50 babies that they took.
Wow, that's fucking terrible.
But now we know.
Yeah, now we know. I have so many things I want to talk to you about. So, have you ever heard of Eurotrash?
Yeah, as in like the music?
So
Was it white trash but European?
anyone who's like 33 years old and older in the UK might remember this. Maybe like 33 to 40 now. I'm 35, by the way. Are you?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought that.
Yeah.
You don't have to tell me if you don't want.
No, just slightly.
Just slightly. Are you 37?
36.
36. I was going to say 36, but I thought, oh, that's too obvious. So, so there used to be this program called on the telly in England called Eurotrash, and it was, I guess, I think it must have been produced in the UK, but it was basically like looking at all what's going on in Europe and like all these kinky Europeans and kind of making fun.
Really?
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
And
but then what were they showing?
yeah, but it's just an interesting like social like comment in the time, isn't it? Like cultural comments and like how we view sexuality and also how we view like Europeans, like mainland Europeans.
Yeah.
Like,
But do you remember any of the content?
it was just kind of like there'd be like some guy like interviewing someone who's maybe she's in like a dungeon and like with all this bondage stuff on.
Yeah.
And like, of course, everyone over here is like, what the fuck? Like, we just not like seen that. But I was watching it as like I don't know, like a 13-year-old boy. Like, but for me, like that was like our porn.
Mm-hmm.
So we, you might see like a little bit of like some tits or something, or like it wouldn't be like, and then for us it'd be like, oh my god, like let's watch Eurotrash. But it wasn't meant to be like pornography. It was meant to be like funny.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, look at these Dutch people that are into like kinky sex, and like it was all these accents and kind of like, oh no, like I'll have to find it and I'll send you like a clip of it. There must be something. But it's just so interesting on where we were talking before about attitudes to like nudity and sexuality and all these things and how it's like this is a great example of like we're watching this stuff going, this is weird. That's what we're being told.
Yeah.
Look at these weird Europeans with all their kinky stuff.
And I mean, just to balance that out, we had these kind of programs too. I mean, we had also had like our German version of Big Brother, and it was the main purpose was that they have these like, it's like a zoo like situation where you watch weird creatures engaging in their weird sexuality. And I think that was always the main selling point, is that it's so intimate and people would watch people in their weird, strange, intimate ways to then like talk shit about it and feel above that. I think like that's what the 90s TV shows were mainly about.
Was Big Brother, did it originate in Germany?
No, I think in Britain. No?
Maybe it was. Yeah.
I don't know.
It was. It was, yeah. It was either or, wasn't it? Of our
surely
two great countries.
Yeah. And it was all, if you think about like TV at that time, it was that like the main selling point was sex, and they were trying to make it more intimate. So they were doing all these like afternoon talk shows, I remember. So a lot of those programs. We also had like several programs that were really mainly focusing on sexuality and kind of like claiming they were just given like a report on it, when in reality it was very much framed as being just silly and weird, really.
Mm. Yeah. I think from everything I've taken from this conversation, I will have a sauna and I will be naked. That's it. That's the take home.
It's like being because like being in a really hot sauna is not a pleasant experience. I think that's also part of it, is suffering naked in community with other people.
Yeah. So maybe I need to experience some of these saunas. But see but then now I'm like castigating myself because I'm like, you dirty boy. You just want to see all the titties.
And you're allowed to. You can
Yeah. Maybe I do. Maybe I do.
being dirty is vitality, really.
Yeah, being dirty is vitality. Fuck yeah. That's the take home.
I'd like to be remembered for that.
Have it on your headstone. Did you ever see that I went on a dating show?
No.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was on my profile. So basically,
No.
have you heard of Naked Attraction?
No.
Okay, so it's a show.
To be fair, this is the 90s. I haven't watched TV at all. So.
Oh, well done. Yeah. So it's like the show in the UK where people get naked and they stand behind these like pods and it reveals like certain sections of the body. It starts like with the penis and goes up, and the final thing is the head, and the last thing
you actually see penis on TV then?
Yeah.
Oh,
they've seen mine. So I've spoken about this a few times on the podcast, so I won't go on about it. But what I wanted to say is like I enjoyed it. Like I enjoyed the experience. Thought it was fun. I didn't really see it as like mega sexual.
Yeah.
In a weird way. But so many people, like most lads, said to me, "Were you not terrified of getting a boner?" That was what all of them said, which is so yeah.
Imagine the situation.
I was like,
there's nothing relaxing about that.
No, I was like, there was no chance of that.
That you need like just a little bit of relaxation to be aroused.
Yeah. But yeah, again, it's just a funny little insight, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, oh no.
Also, yeah, how they're also taught that it's like the worst thing to have an erection, like a public erection.
I suppose, like, probably comes down to like men are always there's a I believe there's a shortage in male teachers. Certainly, like primary school. And I think like the cultural kind of like feedback is that guys don't want to be portrayed as being like a pedophile. Because we have like we do have a history of that in this country. I don't know if it's the same for you. There has been a lot that have come out over the years, and I can even there's even like 2 or 3 teachers that were at my school that like got caught with like stuff on their hard drive and that, and then but like of course at the time we just thought it was funny. Porny Varney, we used to call this guy, and this guy, he did the first science lesson he did with us. He did sex education, and he was like this little short little man with like a balding head, and nothing, no judgment on that. I'm just nothing wrong with being bald or fat. And I remember he put this video on and he said, "Oh, sex education, this is always fun." And he did like a little jig, a little dance. And we were just like, that guy's a creep. And then he got sent to prison. We're like, isn't that funny? Yeah, I told you, porny vorny. but like, it is kind of funny, but like also it's really insidious. Like, what the fuck? So again, like there's that cultural background, and I think yeah, it all comes back to this being comfortable around like sexuality and you know, not having to feel shame and the rest of it. So anyways, I don't know.
I guess in our generation, there was also a strong message to a lot of men growing up that their sexuality always comes with a threat of violence. It's something that I see in therapy a lot, is especially men that grew up with women. And that's kind of a bigger number, I think, in our generation compared to the generations before. As a lot of men that grew up with women were taught from a young age that there is something threatening about their sexuality. And I always use this picture when I talk to men in therapy who struggle, because for a lot of men, they have like, in that context, they develop issues with like keeping up erections, or it's called precox, I think, like precox, when they come too fast. And
oh, yeah, premature ejaculation.
Exactly, things. And so a lot of that comes back to these messages that they grew up with like, like I use this picture of like the penis being a weapon. Is something that a lot of men were taught, not in this direct sense, but this is the messages that they grew up with. And yeah, you can imagine how difficult that is to live a somewhat free sexuality then, if what you're doing is always, or you believe this to be a danger to other people, because clearly you don't want to be dangerous for others.
Yeah, so interesting. Yeah, it's what I'm thinking is that, you know, as we're having this conversation, and I'm thinking of like practical, the podcaster in me is like, okay, let's get practical. So let's go through some like real quick, like quick fire stuff, like take home tactical. I'll run through a lot of questions and then just see where we go. How do you feel about that?
Yeah.
All right. What's the difference between fantasy and desire?
Fantasy is something that lives in your head. Fantasy is something that you may not have a desire to actually act out on. So fantasy counterbalances your shame and stigma that you have learned, and your desire is what you physically find pleasurable.
Right, okay. And how does one go about like working out the difference between those two things? Yeah, that's it.
So let's say you masturbate and you have a common fantasy that you use for that. Then you, first of all, you can let yourself know that none of what you're imagining is something that you necessarily want to do. So it doesn't make you weird or sick that you're imagining these things. It doesn't matter what the content of those fantasy realities are. Because they serve a different purpose. They have a function. Like, you cannot let go and relax enough to be aroused when you're still feeling a lot of shame and like you have these above voices that tell you that it's sick to feel this and that way. So your fantasy is really just counteracting that. And then when you have a desire, it's more that in your head, you're imagining the actual sensation of it. And also when you are with other people, that's something that pops up in your head that you want to do. The fantasies that do not match your desires, they don't pop up when you're in connection to someone, usually. So that's a main difference.
Mm-hmm. What about like, so let's say if someone has a fantasy for like a certain kink and they watch pornography, do you think it's like more dangerous to sort of like go down that route rather than having it in your head?
No.
You don't. Okay. Yeah, I wonder
If
sometimes.
pornography, so if the pornography becomes a necessary substitute, then I would look into that. But
Sorry, say that again. A necessary
substitute.
Oh, so like they don't enjoy regular sex.
Yeah. Sometimes the people they just watch pornos because they're overwhelmed by the interaction with other people, and that's something that's problematic maybe. But no one watches porn that has the content of what you, or like, I'm saying no one, of course it's in there, but most people don't watch porn with content that they actually want to experience in their life.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, what's a friendship crush?
So when you make new friends, that happens a lot, is that you kind of you get like into a little heightened state when you're with them because you find them like really interesting and they have all these like great qualities, because that's why you pick them as friends, because they're like kind of cool and exciting. And it's very similar to having a crush on someone that you're romantically involved with, because you get like excited, very excited meeting them, and you have a really good time and you kind of want to meet them all the time. And that's something that's very common for people to experience with other people that they actually are not romantically involved with, and also have no intention of having a romantic relationship with them. And I just noticed that a lot of people are confused, and then out of that state, they will approach a physical relationship or something sexual or romantic, and are then disappointed that it didn't work out. And I think it's because we're not talking about how you can really hardcore crush on your friends because they're cool, and it will fade just like any other crush too.
Interesting. But is it possible to have a friendship crush but not actually be attracted to them?
Yeah, I think so. I've had that happen, and I've had clients who that happened to, and who then came because they felt like something was wrong. Because they felt all the excitement, and they were like, "Oh, maybe I'm asexual." I was like, "No, you're just excited about it."
Yeah, I suppose like for lads, probably the experience is like you might meet a new friend or whatever, and then you're talking to like one of the guys that you've known all your life, and you're like, "Oh, like there's this guy, like this guy I met at football." And then there's like a meme, I think it's from the In-Betweeners, I don't know if you've seen that, and it's like, "Football friend," and like the guys will take the piss, and that's kind of what's implied, right? It's like you're crushing on this guy who's your new football friend. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I think it's just like a very common thing. Bromance, I think that's also.
That's the common term for it, isn't it? Bromance. It's like a little bit more socially acceptable as well. Rather like, I've got a man crush. Yeah, just
my friend was,
bromance.
My friend was opting for frush to be the new term for the friend crush.
Frush.
The frush.
Yeah, not to be confused with thrush.
Yeah.
All right. Socks on or off in the bedroom?
Off. Personal, very personal answer. Off, please. But yeah, this comes from Euro studies that imply that people with socks on will orgasm earlier or easier because they experience more comfort. It's not about the socks, it's about not being cold. So a certain level of comfort is very important. And
I think you always just feel a bit silly.
And it's a little bit difficult because too much comfort does the opposite. But a certain level of comfort is important.
Yeah, I feel a bit silly if I've got my socks on. It's quite a strange sight.
Also, I mean, I am imagining that the rest of you will be naked.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Like, yeah,
Unless you have like real issues with your feet.
nah. Like usually I'd stop and I'd be like, just hold on, and like I need to take my socks off. She can keep hers on though. Maybe that's the thing. Yeah. Maybe that's a kink. Maybe I'll want your socks on. Interesting. Okay. Should we compromise in relationships?
No.
Why?
I believe compromising. So when I look at a classic compromise is I want things to be done that way and you want things to be done another way, so we meet halfway. Let's say
no one gets their needs met.
Exactly.
Wow.
That's
Yeah.
what's going to happen. But to have like a practical example of that is like I can't stand carpets because they gather dirt and I find that disgusting. And you, Jason, as my partner, you want the ground of your apartment to be soft because you like softness. And so the middle ground that we're meeting at is like a small little ugly carpet that I will hate and you will still not be soft.
Yeah. That's good. I like this one. Yeah, fuck compromise.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I'll be screaming that for the next 10 years while I'm still single. But I'm not compromising.
No, so there's I think there's a healthier way to compromise is like actually figuring out, can I do this thing for you if you need it that much? And if not, can you find this somewhere else?
Yeah, like don't dress it up that it's don't dress it up like it's not it's like not something that is what's the word? Like impactful for you. Like, yeah, we're gonna have a soft ground downstairs, but actually I don't want that, but I'm doing it in service of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like make that noted. Like this is something I'm doing for you. This is not a compromise.
Yeah, and I'll hold it up all the time.
Yeah.
I'll let you know.
Yeah.
I already got the carpet.
Don't bring it up in arguments though. Don't be a dick. Should all relationships start with butterflies?
No. It's not wrong for them to start with butterflies, but I think a lot of butterflies actually stem from insecurity. Like this is your nervous system telling you like something is wrong. And you might seek that out because that's the relationship model that you have learned. That's very helpful.
Yeah, it goes back to like parents and attachment, right?
Yeah.
So
I have like personally, I have learned that intense conflict and abuse and all of that's like a normal kind of relationship. So anything that isn't that will feel boring to me. And that's something that I have worked on. Luckily, I'm over it. But it's something where I know I will get butterflies with someone who's entirely unavailable, but will also not set boundaries.
Yeah.
And that's not a great sign to listen to.
It's like
instead, I might just look for someone who I feel like safe and comfortable around.
Yeah, it's like the whole spark thing argument, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like I had like a little bit of a realization, and for a while I was kind of like, they don't know what they're talking about with this spark thing. Like it's all about the spark. And then I was like, hold on a minute. Like how many girls must have thought they had a spark with me because I'm like quite charming. And it's just like, people are just sparky, aren't they? So like, yeah, that was a real good one for me to be like, oh yeah, like how many times have I not reciprocated what they probably perceived as a spark? So, and how many other people is that going on with where I'm feeling the spark of someone else? Oh, there's a spark, like there's this thing between us. Nah, she's just like sexy as fuck, and she's like that for everyone.
Yeah, also like sometimes it's just a physical desire. It's
Yeah,
also true. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Do you believe we were meant to be monogamous for life? It might be dicey territory here.
Oh, really? We'll have to.
Asking for a friend. Asking, yeah.
There are many different angles. I think there are great arguments on all ends. I don't know. I really don't know. I think that in the 21st century, we have more people with commitment issues than we had before. And I think a lot of them are using non-monogamy as a gateway for that. That's something that I see in my work, is that a lot of people just don't want to commit because it's scary and you lose the options. But that is a highly romantic gesture to commit. But you can have a fully committed non-monogamous relationship. It's just about the way that you practice that and you live that, and the way that you engage with your partners.
I often wonder.
I just see that, yeah, that's just something that's kind of, it's getting rare.
Yeah. See, like the idea of being in a non-monogamous relationship terrifies me. And then, but obviously, like I lean anxious. So, but then sometimes I think maybe it would be like the best thing for me to have to put up with like potentially dangerous, but like if I were, to go through as like a bit of a way to teach me that, like, to get out of my own way and get out of my own ego. Like if you were in like a non-monogamous relationship, to realize you're not the center of the universe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't think it'd be something I'll be doing, but
It's hard work. It's definitely hard work. That's what I can tell.
I suppose like what would be beneficial, like if you were in like, let's say, a polyamorous relationship, would be like your communication would have to be like on point.
Yeah.
But
it's
like
a lot of
yeah,
it's a lot of hustle around it, really. What I find very funny is that a lot of people I know and that I have worked with who have non-monogamous relationships, they have to spend so much time on their like one-on-one relationship that there is actually not much space for other relationships, because it's so much like navigating feelings and talking and having to communicate through and then having to reconnect and all.
Yeah.
But it keeps you in an active process. I think that's a part of it. A lot of people who struggle with like having to go in every day into this like project that we have together, it can be beneficial that you have to stay that engaged for not like lose your contact to the other person, and you have to basically, you're forced to choose this model every day, and that does something.
Yeah, there's always going to be a cost to that, isn't there? So before we wrap this up, where should I direct people to find out your stuff? Tell me a little bit more about your work. Like, just plug away, and maybe you'll get someone seeking you out from this conversation.
So you can reach me as a therapist under my name, Everything is under my name. NadjaLasbeck.com is my website. hello@nadjalasbeck.com is my email address. You will find me on social media under my name, Nadja Lasbeck. I have a podcast that is called The Final Disappointment, which you can only find on Spotify because I am overwhelmed with setting it up somewhere else. Maybe one day, hopefully. Yeah, podcast is a little bit about my work, but actually mainly about like life stuff, really, which all connects. I don't know, there's not a grand theme to it, but if you enjoyed hearing me talk, you need to listen to that. Hear me talk more.
Yeah, I think I ascertained that they did enjoy hearing you talk. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time and for this conversation. And yeah, let's stay in touch and have an awesome day.
You too. Thank you very much for inviting me to.
Bye bye.